15 minutes, anybody had moved an inch on the topic. But when the session starts or when the segment starts, they're not going to move an inch. It's just who's going to scream what talking points at who.
We have the biggest newsroom. We've hired good journalists. 70% of our expenses go to paying the journalists. This is what it costs.
We are definitely losing a lot of great journalism, in particular at local level in small communities. And I think we all agree that that's extremely important.
That is so important, is to always be innovating on your own, experimenting, and just be curious about how things work online. You see something that looks really cool, figure it out.
I wanted to start by kind of setting the tone for this. I've been at this for the digital thing for 26 years now, and as we all know, there have been 1,000 different things that were going to save journalism at some point. We could go through the list. It was SEO, it was going to be video, the pivot to video that everybody tried and most didn't succeed at. Social is going to save journalism. Native advertising is going to help save journalism. Podcasts are going to save journalism. Blockchain is going to save journalism. And all of those things will play some role in figuring out what the future is. But my argument for years has been that what's going to save journalism is what the four folks up here are doing and what so many people out in this audience and watching virtually are doing, which is continuing to experiment, continuing to try new things that are using different strategies, different revenue models, different revenue mixes. Because I do not believe the silver bullet for journalism theory, I think, has been disproven at this point. There is no one thing that's going to save us from a revenue perspective. It's there's no silver bullet, it's shrapnel philosophy, which is we're going to put together that silver bullet with lots of different sources of revenue and audience development. And so it's great to have a panel that's doing so many different things up here. And so I want to get to them and not be the one doing much talking here. So let's get going. So we're going to start with each are going to kind of give a little bit of a level set for what their organizations are doing and how things are going to this point. And we'll dig in with deeper questions on the second round. So we're going to start with Jamie from and by the way, I didn't do the titles and everybody's, as Rosenthal is very clear, when you're at Rosenthal Fest, you do what Rosenthal says. And Rosenthal said, don't read the bios out loud. So you can read the bios in the program, but we're going to start with Jamie Stockwell. We'll talk a little bit about Axios Local.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Jim, for putting this panel together and for all of you who put this panel together. I'm a UT grad, so I'm always happy to be back on campus whenever I can be. UT journalism grad, I should add. So I just joined Axios on March 21st. So I've just finished my second week. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the company and what excited me so much about the company. And I think that'll get into the model too. But Axios was founded 5 years ago by a couple of really smart journalists who had also founded Politico. And Politico is, as everybody knows, a hugely successful news organization. And they founded Axios with this sort of mission in mind to declutter the news space. And what they really had, what really propelled them and what drove them was to bring really smart, authoritative, incisive coverage in a really efficient way to readers. And they created a format to do that, which is called Smart Brevity. It is really tightly written, but it goes deep into why a particular issue matters and what it means. They launched with 50 people 5 years ago. The core newsroom has grown to about 120 people, and it has been wildly successful. Millions of subscribers, daily email newsletter subscribers, who every day are hearing from Mike Allen, who is just a god in the news business. He's amazing. He also has the stamina of a 2-year-old. I don't know how he does this, but he's constantly thinking and constantly running around and writing and reporting. And that model has evolved now into local news. And what is really exciting about Axios Local is it started with just 3 newsrooms just to kind of test this idea that Axios could take the same smart brevity, really authoritative, incisive coverage in local communities using the same reader-first format. Began in Charlotte, Washington, and Atlanta, and then it moved into 11 other cities. So there are 14 cities right now that have daily newsletters, and we are going to be launching 11 more cities by July 2nd. Right now, there are about 55 people on the local reporters on the local staff. And the goal is to add another probably 11 to 12 cities by the end of the year, and then ultimately to get to about 100 cities. So the format is a lean, pragmatic approach in local communities, hiring the top local talent we can get, people who are already deeply sourced, who are very credible, authoritative reporters, and to bring their chops to what it is that we're trying to do. And when you unleash reporters in an environment where they aren't having to deal with any print concerns or any constraints in legacy newsrooms, we've seen that they are able to do really important journalism and are making a huge mark in their market so far. So that's just kind of the overview of Axios and Axios Local, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and I'll be really excited to answer them.
Jeff, tell us a little bit about Village.
Is this working? Oh, there we go. Hello, my name is Jeff Elgie. I'm the CEO of Village Media. We are a pure play, hyper-local news publisher located in Ontario, Canada. So our office looks right out across the river, as we call it, to northern Michigan, right in the hub of the Great Lakes. We started Village about 9 years ago, but the first site in our network actually dates back now 20 years. So we've had 20 years of experience observing, anyways, a successful, actually incredibly strong digital-only local news site. Today, we are in 16 cities in Ontario, ranging in populations from about 10,000 on the low end to about 175,000 on the high end. We have 2 more cities we're launching in May. We run 2 business publications, and we license our platform to about 45 other publishers in the US and Canada. Some interesting facts for you. In the 16 cities that we are in now, we are larger in newsroom size and larger in digital reach than our daily newspaper or weekly newspaper counterparts. We have a North Star metric in our business where we seek to build maximum reach in the community, and our target is to turn 40% of adults 25 plus into daily readers of the site. Sounds like a lot of people. It's a tremendously large amount of people, but our most successful markets have achieved or surpassed that. We've learned over the years that reach is achieved by 3 key things. One of them is the size of our audience in Facebook in particular, as well as our newsletter subscriber base. The other is the actual size of our newsroom, so not necessarily the quantity of newsroom output, but the actual number of original reporters in the market. And the other is the scope of reporting that we do. Our model starts kind of the top of the funnel as a service journalism focus, and then as the newsrooms grow, we get deeper and deeper into the community. We have doubled in size since the start of the pandemic, so we were about 65 staff 2 years ago, and now we're about 135 staff. Our markets are almost all profitable, and we're growing quickly. Thank you.
Right. All right, Ken.
Thank you. You are all a lot smaller than you are on Zoom when you look out there. It is amazing. I'm very excited because I started CEO of Lookout Santa Cruz. Started it we launched November 2020, so this is the first public talk we've been able to do. It is pretty amazing when you think about it. I'm going to run through just the visuals as I talk about Lookout to show you what it actually looks like. Our idea, the big idea, is we want to replace the flagging dailies in sub-metro areas. We started in Santa Cruz County, 276,000 people, hour and a half south of San Francisco. This is our latest launch here. This is puzzles. So we intend to do a lot of what newspapers used to do really well, but of course better, and digital only and mobile first. So puzzles is part of it. The bottom part of that, Santa Cruz puzzles. You'll hear a lot of parallels to what Jeff has done. Local, and actual stuff that people care about is what's key. So here's a homepage. This is a homepage from 2 weeks ago, I think, and you can see kind of the diversity of this. We spent 9 months designing. I didn't want it to look like a newspaper. I want it to look like its own thing. This is kind of Santa Cruz colors. We're right on the ocean there. And be very lively and very visual. And we have carried that through in almost a year and a half. The diversity of stories is really important. On this Friday a week ago, the top 8 stories all featured women, not by design, not Women's History Month, but just because of what we cover. And this one is from yesterday. So you can see heavy emphasis too on community stuff. Richard Gingras talked a lot about doing much more than accountability reporting. I am and have been for 45 years in this business, totally mission-oriented, accountability journalism, and mission is why I'm doing it. But to pull in the larger kind of audience that Jeff is talking about, you have to do the kind of things, and it's fun to do the kind of things that your community wants, including entertainment and including guides. There we go. Accountability stuff, we have done a fair amount of it, and we've done this all under COVID, of course. We had 900 people lose their homes to fire, an incredible number of people in a community that small. In August of 2020, we have stayed on that, and those rebuilding efforts covered sexual assault in the high schools and really covered COVID well and gotten great letters from our readers because of it, saying we had helped save their lives. We are very brand oriented, so that's why you see this shirt. We are Lookout. We have, you'll see the team, and we have 13 people all together. We are big for a community that size. And part of the idea is to be big enough to be able to offer enough of a value proposition to readers and to advertisers. And the sub-brands are each of the correspondents. We have 10 people in the newsroom. They get to know them. Their pictures on the site, and they will be out in the community. You can see here our Q&A. This is a new format we're doing. It's a quicker format, gets a lot more people in, and you're finding out about people in your community, and these are nice one-day stories. Here we go. Oh. Whoa. Okay, go one more. It's a long distance back there. Okay. Ask Lookout is something that we just did. Everything we do is local and place-based. People want to know about that odd building they don't know about. We go and we pursue it. And they're now looking to us for that kind of stuff. In terms of revenue, this is intended to be an earned revenue model. And diversified revenue is the key. We're a membership site. We are an advertising site. The big surprise is Santa Cruz was an ad desert. We have had 45 marketing partners all doing promoted content since our inception. Here's an example of it. The local bank was in right at the beginning, not talking about itself and just talking about its great services, but highlighting a PPP recipient that it brought to the table. This is the kind of promoted content we have really see work. Man, okay. One more. Job board, thank you. Got good eyesight. So job board is another thing. Charlotte Axios, Charlotte Agenda, very successful there, very helpful to us. We launched a job board. Again, diversification of revenue is key. And membership. So membership is absolutely key. We're one of the highest priced sites in the country, $187 a year or $17 a month. But from the beginning, since civic betterment is our key, we give 10% to one of 6 top community organizations. And that has been very successful in showing our community really intent. And lastly, we'll get there. Can you read that one? That's Student Lookout, I think. Thank you, yes. So Student Lookout, another both revenue source and mission, and is to serve high school and college students. We've gotten local donors to pay for access, to pay for student memberships at a highly discounted rate on a New York Times model. And we're now doing a newsletter delivered by text only, and we're in the 3rd week of that. So we have a lot of things going. We're still laying our foundation and look forward to talking about it.
Great. Liz, tell us about Word in Black.
Well, I'm so happy to be here with you all. As you see, I rep the stars because I am in Texas, so I figure I got to represent for you all. As has been mentioned so many times so far in this conference, for many of us, this is the first time since the start of COVID-19 that we have been all together in one space. 2020 was such a strange year. We got the COVID pandemic, but we also saw a resurgence of another pandemic, one which, arguably has been present. I guess you could say it's endemic in America and these shores since the first enslaved people were brought to this land in 1619. And that pandemic would be racism. So in 2020, you had this convergence of people dying because of COVID. And then you also had the death of Breonna Taylor. You had the hunting down of Ahmaud Arbery. You had the murder of George Floyd. So you put all that together, and as Gina said this morning with the example of the bank headline, if you all remember that, it was like, are the Black people being denied the loans, or is the bank, refusing to grant them? In journalism, we've had this thing of objectivity, which I always say is a euphemism for white supremacy, right? And so essentially, the Black press did what we have done since 1827, when the first Black paper was founded, stepped into the void and said, we need to come together, collaborate, and create something new to tell the true story of what is happening in our communities, what is affecting us at a local level, and elevate and amplify those voices and the solutions that are being generated on a local level. And so Word in Black was formed. That was the impetus. And it was interesting because this week, I don't know if you all noticed in the news that finally, after 120, 130 odd years, the signing or the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, we finally got anti-lynching hate crime legislation, right? Vice President Kamala Harris said this, I want to quote her accurately. She said that the Black press is who tell the story when no one else is willing to tell it. And so for our 10 publishers, 10 progressive legacy Black publishers, 2 of them are in Texas. There's the Houston Defender and the Dallas Weekly. Yeah, they came together and they partnered with the local media association. If you know LMA, collaboration is everything. And they said, we have to come up with something new. So we're about to celebrate our first anniversary, June 1st, at the site. I started in January, and I tweeted yesterday, and I mean this so sincerely, I love my job. I wake up every single day just thrilled. We have this mission to be the most trusted news and information source, Black for about, and by Black people, right? Black owned, our publishers own us, right? They have their own individual papers, but they own Word in Black. We're theirs. This is not a sort of thing where, it's kind of like an experiment. We'll just see how it works because we needed to do something after George Floyd was murdered. No, our publishers have been in the game since day one. They are the Black community. And so when we talk about, solutions, inequities, they have the sourcing. In reporting about, Ketanji Brown Jackson, we have Denise Rollard Barnes at the Washington Informer who's able to pull Eleanor Holmes Norton at the drop of a dime and say, would you write an op-ed for Word in Black about why DC statehood and the disenfranchisement of Black folks there means that there is no senator from DC who can vote for her nomination. We're able to pull Larry Lee, who's the publisher of the Sacramento Observer, because, affirmative action is going to come up before the court again, right? We haven't had affirmative action in California in how long? Since Proposition 209 in the 1990s. So being able to have Larry, who's right there in Sacramento, who knows the history of not just the effects of this on Black students in higher ed, but the ripple effects of this through home ownership, entrepreneurship, the business community, the fact that racism costs our economy trillions of dollars. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. You can't tell me that maybe we could be number 1 or number 2 if we didn't have racism. So this is what we do. It's a joy to be a part of this, to bring it, to try to come up with the solutions, to understand that those solutions are coming from the community. and that we're centered. Anyone can read Word in Black, please do. You don't have to be Black to read us, to subscribe to us, give us money. We like checks, okay? We are for profit. But at the same time, this is not centered in the white gaze. This is centered in the Black experience, coming at it with love for Black people, period.
All right.
I dropped the mic.
We're going to leave ample time for questions, so start dropping them in whenever you want to drop them in, by the way. We may drop some in kind of in the middle here. Liz, I want to stay with you. So collaboration, when people hear about a collaborative, that means so many things too. There's a lot of collaboratives out there, and people, I think, have this sense that collaboratives are let's share a bunch of stories with each other. That's not really what I worked on Word in Black a little bit as a consultant for LMA, so I know a fair amount about it. It's very different in the sense that it has, like, one of its focuses is business sustainability. The publisher is not just sharing content, but what else makes Word in Black unique? Obviously, you answered a lot of it with your statement there, but I also, what else makes this unique to you?
No, I think it's a great point that we are used to collaborations being about content only, but we are also a collaboration around business sustainability. You know, for our publishers, many of their publications are family-owned businesses. You know, the Afro with Dr. Draper, they're about to celebrate their 130th anniversary this August, which is incredible to think about that, a Black-owned family paper. And so to have that kind of legacy is invaluable. I would say that for our publishers, with any collaboration, you have to have buy-in from the top. They wanted to do this. They wanted it, right? This was the priority, this service to the community and amplifying the voice of the community. So we have not had that challenge in terms of, like, sometimes when you're doing a collaboration, you have to have that buy-in and you're like, do I have it? Are you on board or not? They're there. They're with us. I think it's an interesting space. Like, you know, I work on the editorial side, a lot of this, you know, Andrew Ramsamy, who's our chief content and collaboration officer, there's that word in his title, collaboration. He works, you know, primarily on the partnership side and the reader revenue and the fundraising and all those sorts of things. And so we're able to bring in partners, you know, like, for example, we have Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which is, you know, funding for Word in Black for our staff is small. You know, we have the content from our publishers that comes in, but we're also ramping up our own staff so that we can create stories that speak to issues from a national standpoint, and then give that copy back to the staff of our 10 publishers and say, localize this, you know, even more. Here's like the national framework of something. So for example, no one's talking about, you know, everyone wants to, like, say for education, you know, Black kids, you know, what are they doing? What's the mental health impact on Black kids of the pandemic, right? So we went and talked to the Black Psychologists Association. No one's talking about, they were thrilled that someone wanted to reach out to them and report them. And then we can send that story back to our publishers and they can localize that. So that's some of the things that I think that really make us unique. But, you know, I think that journalism and business transformation, they have to go hand in hand. You know, that there is no, as we know, you can't do one or the other nowadays. And so I think that it's absolutely key with everything that we do. You know, we are looking at how are we ensuring that we are a sustainable, viable brand, and that how are we ensuring that our publishers are sustainable, viable brands, because they have been doing service to the communities for so long, and we need to keep them there.
So Jeff, you've done two things that are individually hard to do, but you've managed to do both, which is find multiple, really build out a solid revenue stream that has lots of different pieces to it, and you've managed to engage the audience. And for a long time, there were sites that could generate page views and generate revenue, but they did it in kind of a way that did not engage the audience. What do you think, what has allowed Village to do something that really, for a lot of people who've been chasing this for a long time, is a sort of, you know, the magic of being able to do both of those things? And I would assume to some extent they feed each other, but doesn't mean a lot of people have succeeded at it.
That's a big question. I think Village has worked in part because we didn't come from a publishing background. So my background was, I ran a digital agency for 12 years. We used to build websites, do digital marketing programs. And when I started Village, we were very focused on how do we grow audience. So we've always taken kind of an audience first approach. And we did that through building the technology that runs our sites. We did that through paid audience acquisition efforts that still continue to this day. And that's all we did. So that's the other part of it, right? We didn't have legacy baggage. We didn't have to worry about printing a newspaper or meeting a press deadline, et cetera. All our team ever thought about was the digital product. So how do we build digital audience? What do we need to write in digital, et cetera? I think coming from a small community, so my hometown and our head office is about 80,000 people. And so we're also kind of live and breathe it every day. So we are on the ground, talking to people who read the content. We're sitting with the mayor and talking to them about what the community feels about it. We're sitting with local advertisers. I sit across the table from the local car dealer or the local furniture store and talk about, what works and what doesn't work for them. And that has massively shaped our product. And the product now is complex. I don't think anyone here is going to tell you that this business is easy. It's not an easy business. And we always say that we have to do a lot of things right for this to work. You have to build audience properly. Your newsroom has to be working properly. And you have to have a very diversified product mix that drives measurable value for local business. And so I think that is something that, again, because we came from a commercial agency background, it's like this is what we think about. We look at analytics all the time. We're embedded in it all day long. We are making sure that those clients see us in their Google Analytics reports, that we're referring traffic to them, that we're converting for them, et cetera. So I think it's a lot of those things came together to make it work.
So Jamie, with Axios, you guys have the interesting model here of having had a national site before you had a local site. I assume one of the ways that helps is the advertising that you're selling at a national level. Some of it makes its way to the local sites. What other advantages do you think you've gotten out of having this existing organization launching this new product with some experience and some data in their hands?
Yeah, well, one of the really great things about Axios is that, it's a new company, but it had an established following and a number of subscribers to the daily newsletters. And one thing that Axios did when choosing the local markets was to look at where a good number of Axios newsletter subscribers lived and what those communities may need. And so leveraging that national brand has been key. It's helped us gain our footing. It's helped us to establish ourselves in individual cities. There were already a group of people who knew and loved us. But it's also allowed us to leverage our local reporters in these really interesting ways. So being able to, position ourselves to tell really sweepy sort of national stories at a local level, so that it's a bit granular, yes, but also with the really valuable context and distinctive signature style that Axios has.
So Ken, before you launched Lookout, you were on the other end of this, watching a lot of us who played in this space for a long time, writing about it, studying it.
Yeah.
What did you learn? What did you learn during all those years of covering this that shaped how you conceived of Lookout Local?
I can sum it up as I was lucky to be able to talk to people at all levels of the business for 15 years. I looked at especially the models that have worked now and are making that crossover to success, like the Times and the FT. Talking to people like Mark Thompson and John Ridding who ran those. And I remember making presentations to groups like this and saying, we really have to pay attention in local to what they're doing. And what I was hearing was, no, they're just another thing now. They're not the same as we are. And it always stuck in my mind that the thinking that was at, for instance, the New York Times was what we needed. And if you listen to what Jeff talked about in terms of the components of the business, borrowing from that model, first of all, revenue diversification. This idea that is too strongly out there in the local news revival business, that advertising is not attainable, is wrong. And it is hugely important to the number one task in front of us, which is paying lots of journalists to do local journalism. So diversification of revenue, the paid post idea from the New York Times turned into our promoted content, which is a little more than half of our revenue right now. Membership and how to do subscriptions and understand how that funnel works, which is very sophisticated and very different than print, of course. But then something as simple as a job board, which is really classifieds. The ability to create, I think, lastly, if I picked a fourth, create a mobile-first product that people want to use is very, very important to this, and especially to getting all generations to use it. So I applied that and said, okay, we don't have, whatever it is, 200 people in product like the New York Times has. We have 13 people in total, maybe a lot for an area like Santa Cruz County, but we can apply that kind of thinking. And although it's been difficult, I've been able to find enough of the right people who are excited both about the mission and about creating this model. And so it is basically the New York Times model way, way, way skinny down.
Okay, well, let's take a couple of questions right now, actually. Was this for Liz? How does Word in Black include gender and socioeconomic perspectives while you're covering Black and Afro-Latinx communities?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you for that. So one of the things that I think is critical to remember is the concept of intersectionality. That Black people are also women, and also LGBTQIA are also all sorts of other different identities. That these are not separate things, and this is a reality that I think is something that makes our community so specifically beautiful and special. Okay, and that we are able to see this intersectionality and value it and honor it. Not that there aren't challenges sometimes, but that we historically have a level of reporting about this. In terms of gender equity, our publishers, you look at Janice Ware, who's the publisher of the Atlanta Voice, Dr. Draper in Baltimore, Denise in Washington, it just Eleanor Tatum at the New York Amsterdam News, Sunny Messiah Giles, the Houston Defender. These are all women who are running things, okay? It's funny too, because America likes Black women when it's time for election season, right? But what about the rest of the time? Well, the Word in Black readership we found, interestingly enough, it skews over 50 Black women, right? So if you think about that, women are the people who, get stuff done in your community. We are the doers. And so when we're talking about solutions, we are reporting consistently about Black women and what they are doing in our communities.
Okay, so second question. I'm curious to know from the local news panel on how they create and sustain buy-in and trust from local news consumers. How do you maintain meaningful relationships with the people who need your journalism the most? Jeff, you kind of tackled that a little bit, but do you want to go a little deeper on that?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with our mission at local level is to strengthen the communities we serve. And I hear that more and more lately, very similar missions. I think trust for us means, not just publishing stuff online, but being an embedded part of the community. So you will see us participate in almost every single nonprofit, charity, event, or kind of cause in the communities that we can. We give back. And I think the combination of doing obviously fair and accurate and unbiased reporting consistently coupled with being that real community champion has done that. I would not perceive us to have any issue with trust at local level anymore at all. I think we're well trusted.
Ken, you want to talk about the collaborations you're working on? You mentioned before.
Sure, and I can just to piggyback on what Jeff said too. It is that, and even during COVID, speaking at every Rotary, we had a chamber event it is retail, and it is what old successful local newspapers did, and what the chains have dropped is they dropped all of that community connectedness. And then it's just multiple touch points of online. The journalism is where it starts, but giving people many ways to be able to touch you, to ask you questions, have a physical office, where Jeff and I were talking about that, have a physical office that people can come and use your conference room. Some of that stuff's pretty basic. In terms of collaborations, we have found, I think it's really important to find like-minded people in this business, in this revival, that you trust and who have the same models or similar models. So we have put together a group with the Memphian, which is really underreported as a huge success story out of Memphis, Colorado Sun, Long Beach Post, and Block Club Chicago. These are all sites that are fiercely mission-oriented in terms of reinventing local news, but also fiercely dedicated to earning their own way forward with a mix of advertising and circulation money. So we are increasingly sharing ideas of what's working, what's not working, and that's really important to us.
So we keep moving. Let's not all take that question just because we have other questions coming in. I want to get to as many as possible. Let's go. But I want to ask Ken, let's get geeky on your structure. So you're a public benefit corporation.
Right.
Explain what that is and how it differs from your traditional for-profit model.
So it is a for-profit company that has built into its incorporation and bylaws its mission. Very similar again to Jeff's. We say our mission in Santa Cruz, and will be for other Lookout Local sites, is to make the community a better place for all who live here. So that community betterment principle is in there. What it means legally and down the road is when we become successful, if we should have people, especially evildoers, who want to buy us out, the board does not need to sell to the highest bid. It has to take into account that public mission, which is the best protection we could get. The reason we did it, and I'm glad we did it, it was one of many decisions at the beginning, but it was a good one. Three good reasons. One, we need to hire journalists. This is, again, the number one thing in front of us. The world's going to hell. We need a lot more journalists at a local level and every level. What a for-profit corporation allows you to do is to issue debt or equity to raise capital for expansion. Very important. Secondly, we are part of the business community. We're also part of the nonprofit community, and there's a lot of overlap in all these communities. But we're not seen as someone asking for donations, but earning our way forward. And thirdly, talent. And we've talked about it a little at this conference, and I've talked a lot with friends about it. It is a huge question. And to be able to attract and retain talent and offer stock options is going to be really important for us to get the kinds of people and keep them down the road.
So what are there downsides to that structure that make?
The only downsides are at journalism conferences, really. Because it's funny that people really, they obviously, like American Journalism Project, will only fund nonprofits. And I've had long debates with my friend John Thornton, and he'd say, no, I know you're good and you're fine, and I believe in you, but we have this principle. And I said, like, is it religion? And then other people will say it's tax structure. But the only problem is really journalism conferences. People in the community, they don't care. And I've talked about it and written about it. What they care is about what you do and how you serve your mission.
So one way to sum it up is you're Alden-proofed.
We're anti-Alden, in fact. Yes, that is it, yeah.
Right, exactly.
As much as we can.
Right, as much as anybody can.
As much as we can.
So Jamie, when Jim Vandehei spoke at the Night Media Forum a couple of weeks ago, I would say the crowd was somewhat riled up by Jim. Some kind of loved the animal capitalism kind of pitch there, and others were a little less charitable, I would say, if you watch the transcript of the chat, which I have. What people were pushing back on was, how can you really change these markets with two people? I know some have more than that, but I think it's two people to start per market. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also kind of the plan to expand those out, which I know exists?
There is a plan. And I mean, we've taken a very lean and pragmatic approach in every market. So you start out small, establish ourselves, and we will grow as revenue grows. And the plan is to continue expanding. But I think, as Jim said, probably I guess that was just in February. Yeah. I was not yet, I had not started yet at Axios, but I did watch that. And I mean, he made it very clear too that this is, and it's been said on the stage as well, like, this is not a hobby or a charity. It is a for-profit model, and Axios is looking to make money from this. But I vehemently disagree, wholeheartedly disagree, that you cannot have an impact with one or two reporters in a city. I think even one really excellent reporter can have a huge impact, particularly when unleashed from the constraints of legacy newsrooms and print concerns. We have found, one, we're hiring like extremely talented reporters who are deeply sourced, who are of the communities that they are writing about. They are putting their children, sending their children to the same schools as their neighbors. They are driving on the same roads. They are as curious about all of the things that their readers are curious about. I'm going to kind of look at my notes here too, because I want to make sure I don't forget. But we have like just a single reporter in a number of markets. In DC, an investigation into government officials using WhatsApp led to legislation regulating the apps. Here in Austin, there was a scoop about racist comments made by a Democratic Party official that led to her resignation. In Atlanta, we had a deep dive on water pollution that prompted calls for EPA investigation. In Des Moines, there was a deep dive into a local towing company that caused the Board of Supervisors to back off of a towing contract. In Tampa Bay, we explained how the state fails those with mental illnesses. And in Denver, we looked at how special interest money dominates local elections. So those are just a few of the examples of ways that Axios local reporters are making significant consequential impacts in their communities. And I truly believe that right now, just in 14 markets, soon to be 25, soon to be more, we are so well positioned to tell the stories that like truly matter to America and to do them in like really sweeping but also granular ways, and to be able to spot trends. In Texas, we are in Austin and Dallas, soon to be in Houston. If I get my way, we will also be in San Antonio, possibly elsewhere in the state. And then suddenly you can tell the story of the great state of Texas and the things happening here that have real consequence across the country. A lot of what happens in Texas is really impactful elsewhere. Same when you look at our cities of Nashville, Atlanta, Raleigh, Charlotte, Richmond. Now you can tell the story of the New South and the Old South. And we can do that in the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. So I vehemently disagree with anybody who says that you can't do it with one reporter. But I also agree with my reporters who would love a little bit more help and don't want just one or two in each market. So we're working on that.
I did want to just mention, Ken, your socks are not branded, so you missed an opportunity there.
They're for Austin.
Well, for Austin, but your
I should've
T-shirt's
worn
not
my
in Austin.
Axios socks.
You just made a whole thing about branding. I'm just saying. All right. Jeff, one of the things, obviously the first key to having a successful market is the selection of those markets. Like, where do you decide to launch? So, and I know just from having talked a bit about it, this is something you put a lot of effort into to pick the markets. And how do you assess in the village model what markets to go into, and what are the kind of the metrics you look at?
Well, first, we kind of start with the mission, right? So if the mission is to strengthen the community we serve, and this didn't used to be the case, but it is now, we will not go into a market that has a healthy newsroom. To us, there's no purpose in doing that. In our markets, as I mentioned earlier, they're ranging in size from 10,000 to about 175,000 people. And so we tend to look for markets that have a real strong sense of community identity. In a lot of cases, that means you live here, you work here, so not a commuter community. So we stay away from large cities. We will obviously kind of survey the media landscape in that market. And again, if there's a healthy newsroom, we don't go. But we do look at otherwise the output of radio, TV, and print to see what it looks like, to make sure there is an opportunity. We, of course, where we're expanding in Ontario, proximity to our other markets helps a lot. So we share content across markets, we share sales teams across markets. That makes a big difference. And then we'll survey. We'll in advance use tools to survey the community to see where they're getting their news from now, what are the gaps, and that's how we analyze markets. It all goes into a big spreadsheet, and then we just literally make a decision in a minute.
Yeah, and have you had, I don't know the answer to this, but have you launched any and decided later that not the right place, or?
Yeah, we have a couple markets in Ontario that I would say are not great markets for us. One of them, it's not near any of our other markets. We kind of parachuted in there because we thought the Daily was going to be closing in the nearby city, and it didn't. And what we've learned is that this is like a small town of about 15,000 people, but it really gets its news and does its business, its schools, et cetera, are in the bigger city that's attached to. And so it's a modest market. I think it's basically a break-even market, but it's not that successful. We also have a market
that's fairly close to Toronto. It's a bit of a commuter community, and we used to always say that, well, it's not working because it's too close to the city, until we realized that we just didn't have enough reporting there. So we doubled the number of reporters, and that market's starting to grow, but it still doesn't behave the same as markets that are a bit more isolated.
To Jeff's point, my friend David Rousseau, who runs the Kaiser Health News, talked about putting together a misery index as a way to decide where to cite new local news sites, of how bad is the local newspaper or newsroom and how badly does the community need it. It'd be great if somebody did that.
Yeah, and those markets, our target is to have one reporter for every 15,000 people in a community. So if we're looking at a couple markets now that are around 200,000 people, and the newspaper there has 1.5 full-time reporters total. So those to us are opportunities to move into.
That's great. Liz, again, having worked on Word in Black, one of the things that really distinguishes it from other collaboratives I've worked on, because I have worked with a bunch of them, is the participation in almost every meeting of the CEOs and owners of that organization, rather than the editor or someone who's maybe selling advertising. This is the top. It's Sunny and it's Eleanor and it's Larry on pretty much every call that I was ever on. How important when you're running a collaborative is that kind of buy-in from the top? Because I think where they fail sometimes is people are excited to be in it, but they can't get their bosses excited about it.
Yeah, this is it. And I will say that they also call me on the phone too, and we chat about all sorts of things. And they're always like, "Girl, how are you doing?" I love that. And again, it's that piece of these were family businesses, and it really does come through. But I think that buy-in is absolutely crucial. We've all been in newsrooms or had roles where we are not the decision maker. And we have a great conversation, great idea. Yes, we're going to do this package of content about this particular issue, blah, blah, blah. Let's collaborate together. And then you got to run it up the chain and it stalls. Or then somebody's like, is that really a story? I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And then it sort of gets killed, right? And it's that piece again of who gets to decide what is normal, who gets to decide what is news. But all of these publishers are committed to amplifying the voices of this community. They are committed to solutions. They are committed to talking about the disparities, and not through the lens of Black folks are the problem. Black children and families are not the problem. The school system is operating as it was designed. That is the lens. So when they are on the phone with us, they are coming at this with having been in this space, having that trust in the community. They are known in their communities. They are known as the people who have, let's face it, mainstream newspapers have done a ton of harm to Black communities, Latino community, the Asian community, Native communities. Ton of harm to these communities in the way that they're reporting. Even the uprisings after George Floyd, they're looters? No, come on now. Everyone wants to give Ida B. Wells her props now, but listen, did they love her back in the day? Nope. So these publishers see the value of being able to take a local story reported by Black reporters on the ground who know the folks there, and then being able to amplify it to a national audience. They are fully invested in it because it's again, this is not just about the survival of Black folks. As we have seen, the destiny of this country is inextricably tied to what happens to Black Americans. If we don't make it, none of the rest of y'all are either. Racism has a two-way street here. One of the questions that I have is so there's 10 Black publishers in our collaborative, right? We're made up of 10 publishers, but there's 200-something Black, publishers nationwide. For your local newsrooms, do you all partner with them? Not just on content, but on resources, funding opportunities, all those sorts of things. That is, I think, the challenge for this industry, to not just be okay, it's Black History Month, we need a one-off sort of thing. Or, I heard, this church over here is doing something cool, let's give the newbie that to report on. But to center these voices, I think not just for Black folks, but for everybody in that reporting, and that's what our publishers are committed to.
And this will sound like a plug, which I suppose it is, but Knight just funded in January the Knight LMA Bloom Lab, which is providing funding for 26 Black publishers to do some of the same business transformation work, technology stack. And so I totally agree that
Can I say one
Yeah.
other thing? Just the other thing too is that, you know, I grew up with the Chicago, I'm, you know, a Chicago area girl, and I grew up with the Chicago Defender. You know, in Los Angeles, I've been in LA since 1998. Everyone Black there has the Sentinel on their coffee table, right? I think there is a place in our industry where we diss like traditional legacy media. I think it's a yes and piece. You know, like if we really want to reach this community where they are, there is nothing like having that Black paper passed around the barbershop, educating the people about what's actually happening. So I think that we can absolutely NFT, blockchain, whatever the heck we want to do in the future, all right? When I know Black folks that still don't even have a cell phone, so let alone a smartphone. So I always like think about that too as well. Our publishers recognize that there's a place for all of it.
And the Center for Community Media did a really great study, I think last year, that showed how much more Black newspapers cover issues that matter to Black communities. And it was not a little bit more. It was a ton more. And this is for Jamie. Hang on one second. How is Axios Local different than Patch?
Well, I mean, Axios Local is being, you know, funneled from the main Axios brand and newsroom. And, you know, to be completely honest, I don't know a whole lot about Patch today. I remember, you know, when Patch first started, and then somebody here can please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was then, wasn't it purchased by AOL, or it was part of AOL, or something like that, right? So apologies. And then sold again, and a few other times. It is very different from that model. This is an opportunity for Axios to like really leverage the national brand in local communities and to help fuel that the local ecosystem in what I see as a very different and a very targeted way. We have an emailed newsletter, so we have a number of subscribers. Right now, it's something like 770,000 subscribers across the markets. These are people who are saying every day, email me, tell me what's happening in my city, and who want that relationship with us. And so the advertising model around that is very different from what Patch was doing too. We have national advertisers who are looking at all of our markets and then choosing which markets to be in, sometimes all of the markets. If anybody who is based here in Austin and subscribes to Axios Austin, you may have noticed a really interesting ad all week from Northwest Arkansas trying to get people to move to Northwest Arkansas, where it's the cost of living is better, but the food is supposed to be just as great according to those ads. And so it's different in that regard too. I mean, we are hiring local talent to really report deeply on their communities in you know, sort of an elevated journalistic way. We aren't chasing clicks. We don't have to chase page views. We're just trying to build a sustainable daily habit with our readers.
Can you look poised to say something? Were you planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are parallels, and very much I think Axios is a much smarter company, and this is a product of 2022. Patch essentially a company of maybe 2012.
07 or something, it feels like.
No, I mean
yeah.
in terms of local.
Yeah.
In terms of local.
Just that long ago.
But it is dependent on national advertising, and it depends. I was thinking from the earlier discussion about what the success of it is. So it's the definition of it. Clearly, the kind of reporters that you're hiring will make an impact, but they're also taking the stories I've seen written about Axios Local say like this is the next solution in local. No matter how good a work they do and how additive it is, and I acknowledge it probably will be, it is not the level of original reporting that is needed in the kind of markets that Jeff and I are doing. You need more people to tell those stories.
I disagree.
That's really important.
I disagree. We can agree to disagree on that.
Cover all of Denver with one person or two people?
We have 2 people. We're going to be growing, and we can cover the stories that are truly consequential and that really matter. Yes. Yes, we can.
But might I propose a bridge between these 2 positions?
Sure.
Which is that in the older days, the Denver Post, for example, viewed itself as it didn't count itself as part of a larger community of journalists covering a city, right? I would say that in the cities you're in, Jamie, the expectation is you're not going to cover everything. There's going to be other publications that are
Absolutely.
going to be doing other things.
And one thing that Axios Local does do every day too is round up some of the most important news that you ought to be reading from the Denver Post, from the Colorado Sun, from other news organizations that are doing really great work. We are not trying to be everything to everybody. We're still sort of sorting our lanes too, and we're only, in some markets, only 6 months old. In Austin, only 6 months old. Really trying to like focus on what are the stories that are going to really elevate a resident's understanding of their community, help make them smarter, but also steer them toward the really great journalism being done by other news organizations, because there's a lot of it being done.
And we have heard, I mean, but it is aggregation. I mean,
No.
and as an aggregation play, we've all been through.
No, we're doing a lot of
Google.
original journalism.
Yeah, you are
it's
doing
it's,
that
it's
too,
not
but I mean,
just aggregation.
But
There is a roundup in every newsletter that is aggregating some of what is being written by the really powerful, by the Statesman doing really great work, by the Texas Tribune, by other Texas outlets. But we are also doing very original and important journalism.
Yeah. It's a question of value and where the value is going to be.
Well, I think there's great value in it.
Keep going.
We will
No, I'm kidding.
We promise you the slap is not going to happen
Exactly.
up here.
Right.
Look, I've
we
spent.
don't want anybody rushing the stage.
I'm going to
here.
say a couple of things. I have spent more than half of my career in local journalism. I started my career at the Washington Post as a Metro reporter. I returned to Texas for one very big and important reason, and that is that I wanted to be back in my home state doing journalism in my community. I went to the San Antonio Express News, where I was a crime editor. I became the managing editor. As the managing editor, I oversaw the daily operations. I had to cut 3 to 5% every year. It was mandated. Year after year after year, I was cutting news whole. I was cutting freelancers. I was cutting stringers. I was cutting. But I was also, knowing I had to cut, I was trying to conceive of ways to grow revenue in different pieces across the community, through events, through sponsored newsletters, through podcasts, etc. I'm very committed to local journalism. I left local journalism for an opportunity at the New York Times. I had a fantastic time there. Unfortunately, I wasn't even there for quite 4 years. Half of it was a pandemic, so I was working from home. And the only reason I left the New York Times was because of this opportunity to be in a really innovative and exciting space back in local journalism, one of many solutions, but I think a solution that is truly exciting because I don't have to worry about cutting. I'm only focused on growing and being able to hire journalists across the country in key markets and build a model that I believe is a smart model, and then we will see where it goes. Our greatest ambitions are also to get into communities where there are no news organizations and to really dive deep into some news deserts. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like right now, but it is very much on our radar, and it is part of our growth plan. And you know, when you hear Jim Vandehei and others talk about growing Axios Local to 100 cities or 150 cities, 200 cities, that's a lot. And I think, you know, we have an opportunity, even with 1 or 2 reporters, to do significant, distinctive journalism. I am never going to sit here and crap on any other news organization, because I think great work is being done across the board and across the country. And I think all of us together with this single mission of putting the reader first, putting the audience first, telling the stories that really matter to communities, it's a win for the reader, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, and I think there's a beachhead model there, which is you get as many troops on as you can afford to have on shore, and it's not hire beyond what you can afford to.
We're not going to hire
It's
25 people in a market and then have to lay off 15 of them.
Yeah.
We're just not going to do that. We're going to grow at a pace that is sustainable and that makes sense for the revenue, and then we're going to continue to grow as the money comes in. And we're already hiring additional reporters in several key markets, and we'll continue to.
All right, one more round of questions here. This is for Liz. So as mentioned yesterday, how headlines can be dangerous. How does Word in Black present information not only accurately, but ensure that a stigma or stereotype is not thrown into the court of public opinion? For example, When reporting about hate crimes in the media, is there bigger space for discussing possible reasons why a victim might have had some fault rather than looking at it purely as an uncalled crime toward another human? It's not a light question.
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I mean, my mind immediately goes to, the space of, as a team, like when you're workshopping headlines and you're talking through it and, and all that sort of thing. Every team does that. And I think that there is obviously, when you have a team that is, 99.9% all Black, when you are workshopping headlines or going through those things, there's also recognizing that we're not a monolith, and we are going to bring our own, as I was saying, that intersectionality to the fore. I do think that we over-index in media on blaming the victim, and I'll never forget, after Tamir Rice was killed, and some of the photos of him. Same thing that happened with Trayvon Martin. Some of the photos that go out about this. Breonna Taylor, how she was, should she have really been dating that guy? Like that sort of insinuation in there. And that is not something that you see in general in the Black press. There is a recognition that you're going to see that in all the other media spaces. Again, it's that piece of we normalize white supremacy. We don't even see it, And it's something as Black folks, we have it, we grow up in the United States too, we absorb this. So we have to check ourselves as well in this sort of thing. We're not just like a magic wand appears and then we're like, don't have any biases even in our own community. But there's a recognition that the inequities, the systems that exist, they're operating as they are intended to. When you have our new health reporter, Alexa Spencer, she lives here in Austin. I was trying to get her to come over, but she's doing something with her granny today. So it's a granny's birthday. So I hope that's going well. Thanks for dissing me, Alexa. But she wrote a piece about like what she reported out a piece of what the impact of Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation to the Supreme Court could mean in terms of environmental cases and the health of Black folks. And it's the layers of why Black people live where they live, why factories were deliberately built where they were, 1 million Black folks living within, proximity of oil refineries and gas, things, all that sort of stuff. That's by design. Redlining, all that sort of stuff, which is still happening by design. And so I think that we don't have that luxury of wanting to be like, well, you know what, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was telling somebody the other day, so my sister, I was talking to a woman last night, my sister is a detective, she's a polygraph examiner, she was in the military. She and I have gone back and forth about all sorts of fun things, and she's my big sister and she can whoop me, she's 5'2", but I gotta be careful with what I say with her. But, after Mike Brown, I was saying after Mike Brown was killed, my sister said, all he had to do was get back on the sidewalk. And how many times did we see that in the reporting that was out there, And to from another perspective, well, why was it that, as we know, like why is it if he was white would that have been even the issue? So I think that there's a piece of recognizing that and keeping that in mind, and then also seeing that not everyone in our community is going to see things the same way. Does that answer it? I don't know. I'm a former teacher, so I'm always like, check for understanding.
Yeah. Whoever asked, I'm sure would be happy to talk out. In that way. I'm going to ask the other three panelists a quick answer on this one. How do you decide how many people you need to cover an entire city? How do you decide what to cover knowing you can't cover everything with, say, 3 to 5 people? Should the motivation and focus be just on news that will drive in revenue? How do you all make those decisions about what to cover in a city where there are other people covering things as well?
I can go first.
Yeah.
Again, I'm 2 weeks into my job here, but one thing that I've been talking to reporters about at Axios Local is, the stories that we want to be telling in every city and every community are the distinctive stories, something that is not what the other news organizations have already covered. We don't need to come back in and do exactly what they have done. in a slightly different way. I mean, I'm really looking for like key coverage of key areas that maybe some of the local newsrooms don't have the time to cover. Maybe they haven't had a chance to cover. Maybe they don't have as many people, covering politics as an example. So just looking for distinctive signature journalism in a way that doesn't feel, commodity.
And Jeff, when you go into a market where there's 1.5, like if you go in with 4, do you do the same things that 1.5 does? Do you look to go around them?
Well, it depends on what that 1.5 is doing.
Yeah.
So, we wouldn't enter a large market that small now. If we entered a market that size, we'd probably enter with 6 or 7 reporters. We start, again, top of the funnel for us is service journalism. So they're talking about the information needs of the community, what's going on. It's transportation, it's crime, it's housing, it's events, it's all of those things. And then we have a model that basically spells out what gets covered in more and more depth. So City Hall, for example, municipal politics would be the next in line, and that gets deeper and deeper. So we're pretty clear what to roll out with the resources we have. But we don't start fully formed, so we start roughly around 50% target.
Ken, quick answer on that?
Yeah, we don't have a metric yet. Clearly, we're starting out. I think it's 2 things. It's mission and it's model. So we want to make sure we have enough impact. We have tried to devise the product so that we can concentrate the reporting in areas like government accountability, health, education, and arts and food that have formats where we can be a primary news source but deliver short bits of news while doing connect the dots reporting. And that, of course, is something that's difficult to do. We're getting better at it over time. And I think the other part of it, having 13 people there, 3 are on the business side, which we call community and commerce. Having those people out in the community have as much impact as the reporters, especially as we get past COVID.
Mm-hmm. So on panels like this, we all get to talk about successes. We all get to talk about the things that have gone well, and we get to kind of sell a little bit about what we're doing. But having lived the lives that all of you have lived, my own, it's hard. It's a really hard business to be in, and you run into a lot of pain points. What's one lesson, preferably from the operation you're in now, that you would pass on to this particular group of a hard lesson learned? It may not be a fair question for Jamie, who just started yesterday, basically, but
well, right, yeah. So I can't really say hard lesson learned at Axios, but I can say hard lesson learned just in more than 20 years in this business is not the consequences that come from not putting audience first and from not putting the reader first. And for me, that's key. It is my daily mission to always be sort of anticipating a reader's needs, thinking about what the audience wants, and then driving in that direction.
Jeff, and we'll work Jeff, Liz, and Ken.
Am I there? Yeah. I would say video. We years ago invested in building a studio, virtual sets, hiring news anchors, doing daily newscasts. And we still do video, but not like that. We've learned at local level in small markets, it's very hard to draw enough audience to monetize the production costs of video. So it's lots of learnings in video for us.
Pivot away from video.
Yeah.
Pivot away from video, yeah.
So Word and Black is going to celebrate our first anniversary on June 1st, which is really exciting. And I've been there for 3 months. And I think sometimes I suffer from now disease because I'm like, I want it all now. I want everything to be amazing now. So I think that the thing that I'm learning more and more and more about is just that everybody says collaboration is hard, but not collaborating is worse. And, if we don't do it, we lose so much just in terms of everything. We have all those meetings with the publishers just because having that buy-in and that trust, when you ever hear, I don't know if you all have ever seen this experience, but for Black folks and Black culture, the concept of respect is really important. And sometimes, as a former teacher, I taught in Compton, you would see kids and they'd be like, why'd you get in a fight? And they'd be like, because he was looking at me weird. He disrespected me. Because the root word of respect is to see, right? And so if we're not seeing each other, if we don't spend that time, and I think in traditional news, it's like this, just keep it going, don't reflect. But seeing each other, recognizing that our publishers have been there since day one. Investors pull up, they're not going anywhere. They are the investors in the product. So, I think that it's just that piece, that pacing ourselves and recognizing that we're just getting started. We've got a lot of room to grow. And so subscribe to our newsletter, read us, share us. We love you.
Ken, bring us home.
I will be brief. I would say beware who you put in your tech stack. This is, no matter our noble missions, this is a technology business. And if you're going to be small, you're not going to create your own technology. You shouldn't. But those fundamental decisions about who you pick to power your business are hugely important. And we made, I'd say, 8 or 9 really good decisions, and one that we are extracting ourselves from now, and that delays what your ability to succeed is.
And the one extraction can take up as much time as the 8 successes.
And it's painful.
Yeah.
It's very painful extraction.
All right. Well, I think we finished right about on time. So thank you very much for your questions and attention.